Hey everybody, this video is called Let's Kill Him. And tonight we're going to continue our pass-through study here in the book of 2 Samuel in chapter 4, where we're going to be looking at the assassination of Ishbosheth. So chapter 4 verse 1 through 4 says, "When Saul's son heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart, and all Israel was troubled. Now Saul's son had two men who were captains of troops. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other Rechab. The sons of Ramon, the Beerothite of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth also was part of Benjamin, because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and have been sojourners there until this day." Verse 4, "Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and the nurse took him up and fled. And it happened, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. His name was Ishbosheth." I love these Old Testament names, by the way. But Ishbosheth and all of Israel realized that Abner had been the source of strength and stability for Israel. And with Abner dead at this point, Israel was troubled because Ishbosheth was no longer the leader for the army, which secured him in power. And we see that it stressed these men of the tribe of Benjamin to a max. And perhaps it was to show the friction within the house of Saul and his son Ishbosheth, and how the grab for power began once Abner was gone. And Beeroth was a Canaanite town belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. And Gittaim was also a village of the tribe of Benjamin. And Mephibosheth was disqualified here to demonstrate that his youth and his physical handicap considered him not qualified to rule Israel. And he would have been 12 years old at the time of Ishbosheth's death. And this is one of the areas in the Bible where you can find someone with a disability like that within that culture. You know, it's been a cultural issue throughout the centuries past, where someone with a disability, they're looked down upon in society. And verse 5 through 7 says, "Then the sons of Ramon, the Beerothite, Rechab, and Baanah set out and came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who was laying on his bed at noon. And they came there all the way into the house as though to get wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. For when they came into the house, he was lying on his bed in his bedroom, and then he struck him and killed him, beheaded him, and took his head, and were all night escaping through the plain." So, very graphic details were given right here. But it was the custom to secure wheat for the soldiers under their command, along with some pay. And under the pretense of that normal routine, the men traveled by way of the Arabah, or the Jordan Valley. In the plain, it extended approximately 30 miles from Mahanaim to Hebron. And they wanted to prove to David that they murdered his rival to the throne. In verse 8 says, "And they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, 'Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life, and the Lord has avenged my lord the king this day of Saul and his descendants.'" So the murderers of Ishbosheth came to David, and we see that they proclaim that the Lord has avenged. And David, however, as happened earlier to the Amalekite back in chapter 1, verse 12 through 15, The men were very surprised at the response of David. And David did not see their deed as the Lord's vengeance, but he saw it as murder of an innocent person. In verse 9 through 12 says, But David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, and said to them, As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all adversity. When someone told me, saying, Look, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good news, I arrested him and had him executed in Ziklag, the one who thought I would give him a reward for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous person in his own house on his bed? Therefore shall I not now require the blood of your hand and remove you from the earth? So David commanded his young men, and they executed him, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. And they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it at the tomb of Abner in Hebron. And so we see it's a very short chapter here, just the 12 verses. And a striking contrast is shown between David and the two murderers who claim that they were performing the Lord's work by killing Ishbosheth. However, we see that David praised the Lord for his providential work through Ishbosheth's life and proclaimed the Lord's deliverance. And therefore, we see that David is condemning the murderers of Ishbosheth. And we see that he calls for what the law calls for. He calls for their execution. And, as he had done to the man who had claimed to kill Saul back in chapter 1, verse 15 and 16. And remember in 1 Samuel 24, verse 20 through 22, that David pledged to honor and preserve Saul's family and descendants. And so, to wrap up our study here, we witnessed the weakened condition of the house of Saul. And we learn of the two suspects, Baanah and Rechab. And they murdered Ishbosheth. And we saw them bringing Ishbosheth's head to David, kind of showing off and away. And then David would have them executed for their murder. And that's a quick summary of this very short chapter. And I hope that you join me next time as we're going to look at David being made king over a united Israel. So these last few chapters 2 through chapters 4, hasn't been very comfortable. It's kind of make you squirmy as you go through these chapters, but we're going to see something more uplifting to us in the upcoming chapter. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. God bless.